The night Mrs. Margaret arrived in Lagos, Evelyn did something that made every person in the mansion freeze. She stood at the top of the wide glass staircase, looking down like a guard in a tower. Her dress shone softly under the white lights. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, like she was watching for danger. When the old woman stepped inside with a small suitcase and tired feet, Evelyn didn't rush to greet her. She didn't smile. She didn't even say, "Welcome." Instead, Evelyn said, in a cold, clear voice, "Nobody touches her bag." The driver's hand stopped in mid-air. The housekeeper swallowed hard. Even Adams, Evelyn's husband, looked confused. "Evelyn," Adams said gently, "that is my mother." Evelyn's eyes did not soften. "I know," she answered. "And I mean what I said." Mrs. Margaret stood quietly by the door. She was small and thin. Her wrapper was old but clean. Her grey hair was neatly covered with a simple scarf. She held the suitcase handle like it was her only support. Her face looked kind, the kind that made people want to help her. But Evelyn only watched her. Outside the gates of the mansion, the neighbors had already gathered in their minds. People in Lagos were quick to talk, and this glass house was famous. It stood like a shining box in a rich area, tall, modern, and bright at night. People called it the Mirror House, because the walls were glass and reflected everything. Now a new story was coming. The billionaire wife is wicked, some would whisper. She is heartless. Inside the house, Evelyn turned to the housekeeper. "Take her to the back wing," she said. "The back wing?" Adams repeated. "Evelyn, that place is far. Why not give her the guest room near our room?" Evelyn finally looked at Adams fully. Her voice went even lower. "Because I said so." Adam's eyebrows tightened. He looked like a man caught between two storms, his mother on one side, his wife on the other. He loved them both, but he didn't understand why Evelyn was acting this way. Mrs. Margaret lifted her head and smiled weakly. "It is fine, my son," she said softly. "Anywhere is okay." Evelyn's lips pressed together. She turned away quickly, like she did not want to hear Mrs. Margaret's voice too much. Then she added, "Her room stays locked when she is not inside. And no one enters without me." The staff stared at one another. "Locked? For an old woman?" Adams stepped forward. "Evelyn, please." Evelyn raised her hand to stop him. "Adams," she said, "I am doing this to protect my family." Her words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Protect them? From who? From the old woman who looked like she could barely climb the stairs? Adam's voice softened. "Protect us from what?" "From my own mother." Evelyn did not answer. She walked down the steps slowly, her heels tapping like a clock counting time. She stopped near Mrs. Margaret and looked at her closely. Not like a daughter-in-law looking at family, but like a detective studying a suspect. Mrs. Margaret's eyes were warm. But there was something else too, something quick. Like a tiny spark that vanished before anyone could be sure they saw it. Evelyn leaned closer. "You will follow every rule in this house," she said quietly. "Every one?" Mrs. Margaret nodded. "Yes, my dear." Evelyn stepped back. "Good." That night, the back wing room was prepared. It was the smallest room in the house, with one narrow bed and a small window that faced the fence, not the garden. It wasn't dirty, but it felt lonely. As the housekeeper led Mrs. Margaret away, Adams walked beside them with slow steps. "Mummy," he whispered, "I'm sorry." Mrs. Margaret patted his hand gently. "Do not worry," she said. "Evelyn is just careful." But when Mrs. Margaret said the word careful, her eyes flicked down the hallway, toward a small black camera in the corner, then flicked back up again. Adams did not notice. He was too busy feeling sad. Evelyn noticed. Later, when everyone went to bed, Evelyn did not sleep. She sat in her office with the lights off, the city glow reflecting faintly through the glass walls. On her laptop screen were camera feeds from different parts of the house. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway outside Mrs. Margaret's room. Evelyn watched them all. Her phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen from a number saved as unknown. "Be careful. She's inside." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the phone. She stared at the camera view outside Mrs. Margaret's room. Nothing moved. Then, slowly, the door handle turned. Evelyn's breath caught. The door opened a little, just enough for a shadow to slide into the hallway. Mrs. Margaret stepped out, moving quietly, not like an old woman with weak bones. She moved like someone who had done this before. Evelyn stood up so fast her chair rolled backward. Mrs. Margaret looked left, then right, and started walking toward Adam's bedroom. Evelyn's heart pounded hard. She ran out of the office and into the hallway, her feet silent on the polished floor. But before she could reach the stairs, she heard a soft click. The sound of a key turning. Evelyn froze. Because she knew that sound. Only one person in the house had that key. And Mrs. Margaret had just used it. Evelyn reached the hallway just as the door to Adam's bedroom closed softly. Her heart raced. Her ears strained for any sound. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made fear feel louder. She did not rush forward. She had learned long ago that rushing caused mistakes. Instead, she turned back and pressed a button on her phone. The hallway lights flickered on. Inside the bedroom, there was a sharp movement. Evelyn walked forward slowly and knocked once firmly. "Adams," she called. "Are you awake?" There was a pause. Then Adam's sleepy voice answered, "Yes, what is it?" Evelyn opened the door without waiting. Adams was sitting up in bed, rubbing his eyes. The room looked normal. The bed was neat. The chair by the window was empty. But Evelyn's eyes moved quickly, too quickly to be casual. She saw it. A thin silver file resting half-hidden under the bedside table. Her chest tightened. Mrs. Margaret sat quietly on the small sofa near the door, hands folded on her lap. Her face looked calm, almost innocent. "I was feeling cold," Mrs. Margaret said softly. "I wanted to ask my son for an extra blanket." Adams frowned. "Why didn't you ask the staff?" Mrs. Margaret smiled. "I did not want to disturb anyone." Evelyn stepped closer, her face hard. "At night. Without permission." Mrs. Margaret looked up at her. "I am sorry if I broke a rule." Evelyn picked up the silver file and held it up. "What is this?" she asked. Adams blinked. "I don't know." Mrs. Margaret's eyes flicked to the file for half a second, just long enough. Evelyn noticed. "It was not here earlier," Evelyn said. "Now it is." Mrs. Margaret stood slowly. "I must have knocked it down by mistake." Evelyn said nothing. She turned and walked to the door. "Back to your room. Now." Mrs. Margaret obeyed without protest. Adams swung his legs off the bed. "Evelyn, you are being too harsh. She is old. She is tired." Evelyn faced him. Her voice dropped. "Tomorrow morning, I am changing the rules." Adams sighed. "Evelyn." "I am protecting us," she repeated. "Even if you don't understand." The next morning, the house woke up under new control. Every door now had a lock code. Every camera had a wider view. Staff members were given strict instructions. No one spoke to Mrs. Margaret alone. No food was given without approval. No rooms were entered without Evelyn's permission. Whispers started immediately. The cook complained quietly to the cleaner. The driver shook his head. The housekeeper avoided Evelyn's eyes. By afternoon, the neighbors had noticed too. Mrs. Margaret no longer sat in the garden. She no longer walked freely. She stayed in her small room or in the living room under watch. People talked. "That woman is wicked. Money has spoiled her heart. How can she treat her husband's mother like this?" Adams felt the weight of those words. He felt ashamed. At lunch, he tried again. "Mummy," he said gently, "are you okay?" Mrs. Margaret smiled. "I am fine." Evelyn watched her closely as the food was served. Rice, soup, vegetables. Nothing missing. But later that evening, the cook rushed into the living room. "Madam," she said, shaking, "food from the store is missing." Evelyn stood up immediately. "What kind of food?" "Dry goods. Rice bags. Some sealed packs." Adams frowned. That makes no sense. Evelyn turned to the cameras. She watched the recordings carefully. Nothing. No one entered the store. No doors opened. Yet the food was gone. That night, another problem appeared. Adam's important documents, papers linked to his business accounts, were missing from the safe. Adam's voice rose. This is serious. Evelyn's face stayed calm. Too calm. She looked straight at Mrs. Margaret. Did you enter our room today? Mrs. Margaret gasped softly. Never. Adams stepped between them. Enough, Evelyn. You cannot keep blaming her without proof. Evelyn leaned closer to him and whispered, the proof is hiding. That night, Evelyn did something no one knew about. She placed a small tracker inside a document folder and returned it to the safe. Then she waited. Hours passed. Just after midnight, the tracker moved. Evelyn's phone lit up. Her heart sank. The tracker was moving slowly, toward Mrs. Margaret's room. Evelyn grabbed her coat and headed down the hallway. But halfway there, the tracker signal stopped. Right outside the house. Someone had taken the documents out. Evelyn stopped walking. Because only one person had access to the back gate at night. And Mrs. Margaret had the key. Evelyn stood still in the hallway, staring at her phone. The tracker signal had stopped. Not inside the house. Not in the garden. Outside the gate. Her heart beat slowly now, not fast. This was worse than fear. This was confirmation. She turned and walked back to her office without making a sound. She locked the door and pulled up the camera feeds again. Her fingers moved quickly, steady, like she had practiced this many times. Back gate camera. The screen showed the gate opening just minutes earlier. A small figure stepped out into the night. Mrs. Margaret. She was wearing a dark wrapper and a loose sweater. Her steps were quiet and sure. She did not look confused or weak. She looked careful. Prepared. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She is not lost, Evelyn whispered to herself. She is working. The next morning, Evelyn acted like nothing had happened. She sat at breakfast, calm and neat. Adams looked tired and worried. Mrs. Margaret arrived slowly, leaning on her walking stick, breathing lightly like the night had not happened. Adams helped her into her seat. Mummy, you should rest today. Mrs. Margaret smiled. I slept well. Evelyn watched her hands. They were steady. No shaking. No pain. That afternoon, something else went wrong. The staff began to argue. The driver accused the cleaner of stealing money. The cleaner cried and pointed at the cook. The cook shouted and said she was being blamed unfairly. Voices rose. Tears fell. Evelyn stepped in sharply. Enough. Everyone froze. This house is under pressure, Evelyn said. And pressure shows the truth. Adams looked at her. Evelyn, you are scaring everyone. I know, she replied. That is part of it. That evening, Adams confronted her in private. I can't keep doing this, he said. My mother is being treated like a criminal. People are talking. Even my business partners are asking questions. Evelyn looked at him with tired eyes. Do you trust me? Adams hesitated. Just for a second. That second hurt. I want to, he said. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then let me finish what I started. That night, Evelyn set her plan in motion. She told the staff she would be away on a short trip. She packed a small bag and left the house in full view of the cameras. But she did not go far. She returned quietly through the side entrance after midnight and hid in the security room, watching every screen. Time passed. Then, just before 1 a.m., Mrs. Margaret's door opened. Evelyn's breath slowed. Mrs. Margaret stepped out again. This time, she did not go toward Adam's room. She went toward the study, the place where the remaining documents were kept. Evelyn watched as Mrs. Margaret removed a thin tool from her sleeve. The lock clicked open. Evelyn's hands shook, but only for a moment. Inside the study, Mrs. Margaret moved fast. She opened drawers. She scanned papers. She slipped a folder into her bag. Then she stopped. She looked straight up, at the camera, and smiled. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She knows, Evelyn whispered. Mrs. Margaret reached up calmly and adjusted the camera angle. The screen went dark. Evelyn rushed out of the security room. By the time she reached the study, the window was open. The room was empty. Only one thing remained on the desk. A single envelope. Evelyn picked it up with careful hands. Her name was written on it. Inside was a photograph. A much younger Mrs. Margaret stood beside a group of men. Serious men. Powerful men. The kind of men whose names were never written in newspapers. On the back of the photo were 4 words, written clearly. You are too late. Evelyn's knees weakened. Because she knew those men. And she knew what they did to families like hers. Behind her, a voice spoke softly. You were always very smart, Evelyn. Evelyn turned slowly. Mrs. Margaret stood in the doorway, smiling. And she was not holding her walking stick. Evelyn did not scream. Her heart felt like it stopped, but her face stayed still. She turned fully to face Mrs. Margaret, studying her in the dim light of the study. The old woman stood straight. Too straight. Her shoulders were firm. Her eyes were sharp and awake. The walking stick was gone. The weak, slow grandmother was gone too. You planned this, Evelyn said quietly. Mrs. Margaret chuckled, a low sound that did not belong to a helpless woman. Planned? No. Prepared? Yes. Evelyn tightened her fists. You used my house. My family. Mrs. Margaret stepped inside and closed the door behind her. You used me first, she replied calmly. You watched me, locked me in, treated me like a prisoner. Because I knew, Evelyn said. I just didn't know how far you would go. Mrs. Margaret's smile faded slightly. Then you know why I am here. Evelyn nodded slowly. You want Adam's business. His name. His accounts. Mrs. Margaret laughed softly. Adams is too soft. He doesn't understand power. But I do. Evelyn felt anger rise, hot and sharp. You are his mother. And that is why this works, Mrs. Margaret said. No one suspects a mother. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Adam's voice called out, Evelyn. Mrs. Margaret's eyes flicked to the door. Ah, she said. Right on time. Evelyn's heart dropped. The door opened, and Adam stepped in. He froze when he saw them standing face to face. Mummy, he said. What is going on? Mrs. Margaret's face changed instantly. Her shoulders drooped. Her voice softened. My son, she said weakly. Your wife attacked me. I was afraid. Adams rushed toward her. Evelyn, what did you do? Evelyn stared at Adams in disbelief. Don't believe her. Mrs. Margaret clutched Adam's arm. She hates me. She always has. Adams looked torn, confused, scared. Evelyn, please explain. Evelyn took a breath. Your documents. The missing food. The tracker. Mrs. Margaret interrupted with a cough. She is lying, she whispered. She wants to push me out. Evelyn reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph. She held it up. Do you recognize her? Evelyn asked Adams. This woman. Adams looked at the photo. His face drained of color. That is my mother, he said slowly. But those men. Mrs. Margaret's grip tightened on his arm. Old friends, she said smoothly. From long ago. Evelyn stepped closer. From illegal deals. From stolen companies. From lives ruined. Adams shook his head. No. This can't be true. Mrs. Margaret turned her eyes to Evelyn, cold and sharp again. You should have stayed quiet. Before Evelyn could react, Mrs. Margaret reached into her bag and pressed a small device. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Adams shouted, Mummy. There was a loud crash. Furniture fell. Someone cried out. The lights flickered back on. Mrs. Margaret was gone. The window stood wide open. Adams ran to it, breathing hard. She jumped. Evelyn rushed to the desk. The folder was missing. The remaining documents, gone. Sirens sounded faintly in the distance. Evelyn's phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. You protected him well. Now watch him fall. Evelyn's hands shook. Because she knew this was not over. Mrs. Margaret had not just escaped. She had taken exactly what she needed. And now, Adams was in danger. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed against the glass walls of the mansion, breaking into sharp pieces on the floor. Adams stood by the open window, breathing fast, staring into the dark like he could still see his mother running away. Evelyn closed the window slowly. She planned this, Adams said, his voice shaking. All of it. Evelyn did not answer right away. She walked to the desk and picked up the empty envelope again. Her mind was already moving ahead, counting risks, remembering names, seeing paths that could not be unseen. She wanted you to see her as a victim, Evelyn said. So that when everything breaks, you will doubt yourself. Adams turned to her. Everything breaks. Evelyn met his eyes. Your company. Your name. Your freedom. The police knocked at the door. Evelyn opened it calmly. 2 officers stepped in, their faces serious. We received a report about missing documents, one said. And a possible break-in. Adams swallowed. Yes. My mother. Evelyn touched his arm. Just once. A warning. She is elderly, Evelyn said smoothly. Confused. She wandered off. The officer nodded. We will search the area. When they left, the house felt empty again, too empty. Adams sank into a chair. Why would she do this? She raised me. Evelyn knelt in front of him. Her voice softened, but it did not break. She raised you to trust her. That was the lesson. Adams covered his face with his hands. Evelyn stood and walked back to the security room. She pulled up one last camera feed, the street outside the gate. A black car rolled past slowly. The back window lowered. Mrs. Margaret's face appeared in the dark, calm and proud. She looked straight at the camera. She raised one finger. Then the car disappeared into the night. Evelyn's phone buzzed again. Another message. Tomorrow morning, his world changes. Evelyn felt fear, sharp and cold, but beneath it, something stronger rose. Hope. She returned to Adams. We don't have much time, she said. By morning, people will come. Lawyers. Banks. Questions. Adams looked up. What do we do? Evelyn paused. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment no one else could see. We let them believe the story they already want, she said. Adams frowned. Which story? That I am the cruel wife, Evelyn replied. The one who hates her mother-in-law. The one who controls everything. Adams stood up. No. I won't let you take the blame. Evelyn smiled sadly. They already blame me. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. I set a trap, she said. Long before she arrived. Adams stared at it. What's on it? Proof, Evelyn said. But proof only works if the other side feels safe. The house phone rang. Evelyn answered. Her face did not change as she listened. When she hung up, Adams searched her eyes. Who was that? The bank, Evelyn said. They froze your accounts. Adams staggered back. Already? Evelyn nodded. She moved fast. Another call came in. Then another. Board members. Business partners. Friends who suddenly sounded distant. The glass house felt smaller with every ring. Evelyn turned off the phone. They will come for you, she said quietly. And when they do, you must look weak. Adams shook his head. I don't understand. Evelyn placed the flash drive in her pocket and walked toward the front door. Where are you going? Adams asked. To give them what they expect, Evelyn said. She opened the door. The night air rushed in. Outside, cameras waited. Questions waited. Judgment waited. Evelyn stepped into the light. Behind her, Adams called her name. She stopped, but did not turn. "Trust me," she said. "Even now." The door closed. Inside the house, Adams stood alone, surrounded by silence and glass, holding a truth he was not ready to see. Outside, Evelyn lifted her chin as voices rose around her. Far away, a phone rang in a moving car. Mrs. Margaret answered it with a smile. "Begin," she said. And in that moment, with everything on the edge of collapse, no one knew who would fall first. The story finally ended months later, inside a quiet courtroom in Lagos. Everyone expected Evelyn to fall. But the flash drive she carried that night held everything. Secret transfers, fake signatures, hidden partners, and recordings that traced Mrs. Margaret's plan back many years. Evelyn had waited until Mrs. Margaret felt safe, powerful, and untouchable. That was when the truth was released. Mrs. Margaret was arrested while trying to escape the country. Adam's name was cleared, his fortune restored, and the men in the photograph were exposed one by one. The public apologized to Evelyn, but she did not celebrate. The marriage did not survive the damage, though respect did. The glass house was sold. And Evelyn left Lagos quietly, remembered forever as the woman everyone judged too early, and the one who stopped destruction before it swallowed them all. Thank you for listening. What is your view about this story? Let us know in the comment section. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe to our channel.